What's going on here? I mean, how could economists get it so wrong? And, you know, is there just a complete underestimation, perhaps, of what is these lockdowns and how they were ending, though there were many still in place in May, that this is pent-up demand?
I'm afraid that this is a very turbulent time, Richard. I mean, it's probably more difficult than ever to predict very precisely where the numbers are going. I think, in particular, if we look at the May numbers, it's probably subject to some, release of capacity and pent-up demand. And when it comes down to port situation getting better from a logistics perspective, and that's why we think that this number had a major jump. But then on imports, I think it remains to be seen, of course, whether such strength can continue. But you can see that still export was much stronger than imports, implying that external demand is still much stronger than domestic one.
It does indeed show that. How does it sit next to the other data that we've been getting from China?
Well, I'm afraid that it is consistent with some of the other things we are seeing. For example, that in terms of retail sales and also fixed asset investment, the numbers were actually low. But at the same time, if you look at the PMI in May, the numbers were actually improving a bit over, what we saw in April.
So but they were not blowout numbers, though. That's the thing.
That's true. I think it remains to be seen whether the industrial production data this month would actually show some of that. But I'm afraid that maybe a lot of this is not directly related to those manufacturing directly for external sectors, but more because of shipments and also, ultimately at the port when it goes into the data of exports or imports. And because of the lockdowns in earlier months, those have been interrupted, and therefore maybe we will see an export boom without a manufacturing boom.
The thing is, Helen, supply chain disruptions caused by China have prompted people to turn to the likes of Southeast Asia. And with inflation surging prices, we also have consumers in the likes of the US and Europe tightening their belts. So it's not looking great in the coming months, is it?
I'm afraid not. I think there are two sides of the problems, right? One side is the supply, and especially because of the capacity restraints that we're seeing not only in China because of the lockdown measures, but also elsewhere. I think this COVID impact is still largely with us. And at the same time, I think you also see the beginning of a little bit of a demand weakness from US and Europe. We don't think that it is extremely evident yet that, everything is, especially consumer demand, is weakening quickly. However, we couldn't rule it out that there is a rising probability that there could be a small recession later in the year. So if that is the case, then we probably will see more challenges, more headwinds on trade, and especially coming in the second half.
Helen, we're hearing murmurings that the U.S. may lift some of those tariffs imposed on Chinese goods. How much of a game changer is that for China?
Well, if everything is completely removed, all the additional tariffs is completely removed, I think that it's probably going to be extremely positive from a U.S.-China trade perspective. However, I would say that we probably wouldn't take that as the baseline case. At the moment, I think there is a still political cloud on both sides, and preventing this kind of improvement in the bilateral trade relationship from happening. And therefore, I would say that we will be lucky to have maybe a few more exceptions, which is more oriented from the U.S. side and specifically customized for U.S. businesses applying to be exempted from such additional tariffs. If we can see a broader, range of those, I would say we will be good enough to see some improvement. But I would say that calling for complete removal of additional tariffs might be a little bit too aggressive.
Tell me something, David just came up with this stat here, that if you look at the trade surplus as of May and you look at it as a year-to-date number, it is the best performance in 7 years.
It's not good news, Richard. The reason is that, yes, export is so far holding okay, but primarily that trade surplus expansion came from the fact that your imports were weakening so fast.
So does it then, therefore, by that same logic, show that there is actually quite a lot of deep weakness within the Chinese economy still?
From domestic demand, yes. Yes.
Right.
That is a sign of weakness.
So we'll be seeing, this should be seen in the retail sales numbers that we've been getting as well, and some of those PMI services data as well, which have been on the weak side.
Of course. I would say that that is important to watch. Of course, this is better. So, well, the export, numbers being so high is still better than, having a low export number. But at the moment, I think the contrast is still sticking out, which is external demand is so much stronger than domestic ones. What can we do to stabilize domestic demand, especially in the service area you mentioned?
Helen, what about these lockdowns? Have we underestimated how they've played out with this? Because people weren't able to go to work. I mean, Shanghai was closed in effect for 2 months or thereabouts. How does that story actually dovetail into these numbers and also the other data?
I would say that the lockdown measures are having two major impacts on the consumption and the general domestic demand. One is actually it hurts the demand in general because people don't go out, they don't have the social activities, and therefore they don't buy things. But secondly, there is also this big problem that it actually destroys jobs, and therefore when income slows down, income growth slows down, and jobs disappear, then we could have another round of indirect impact on consumption.